Hello friends! Age of Mythology Retold should eventually feature the Chinese civilization and their campaign. This isn't just my opinion, although I do think this. But this was already confirmed by the creative director of the Age series at World's Edge, Adam Icecreen, in a podcast last year. See for yourself.
Making sure that we really can make an incredible version of Age of Mythology with all of the content, right? The Chinese DLC and the civilization, improved, right? And really playable. I really believe that I think Mythology can honestly go up there and compete toe to toe with the other Age games,
right?
In quality and in content. And so I'm really looking forward to kicking off this relationship with Mythology, and then hopefully, we run it for years and years, just like we have the other ones.
Now, it's absolutely no secret that the Tale of the Dragon DLC was not a success. Far from it. It's a worst reviewed Age of series product on Steam. As some of you may be aware, this DLC was my first paid gig as a game designer. I'm not particularly proud of this early part of my career, but I did get to work on some fantastic projects like Halo Wars 2 and Total War Warhammer 2 and 3 thanks to it. In this video, I want to sum up the things that went wrong during the creation of the DLC, discuss some missed opportunities, and propose some pillars that Retold's version of the Chinese civilization should be built around. But before that, let me tell you about today's sponsor, World War Armies. This RTS game is perfect for playing on the go. I would even go as far as saying that this is the best-in-class option when it comes to mobile strategy gaming. World War Armies is directly inspired by classic RTS games as seen on PC, and it captures that feel in head-to-head PvP matches. Fans of Company of Heroes or Command & Conquer will feel at home, with familiar game mechanics and clean implementation delivering the quality experiences that we RTS fans seek. The game features a variety of authentic World War II vehicles and infantry, great graphics, and precise unit control. World War Armies features multiple nations to play as, such as Germany, the USA, and the USSR, with each featuring 20 plus different units. In total, there are more than 70 units in this game, including engineers, flamethrowers, rangers, Jaegers, and of course tanks. There are various playstyles available, and you can truly stand out with your own handcrafted deck. Choose from among a nation's generals, with each offering unique abilities. Some launch airstrikes, while others allow you to collect more resources on the battlefield. A great variety of maps will also help with mixing up your match-to-match experience. Between urban combat, open fields, or being separated by rivers, you and your opponent will need to use the terrain to your advantage. World War Armies is an online multiplayer game, and as such your skill as a commander is the most important factor to deciding the outcome of each encounter. Play 1v1, or if you prefer, grab a friend and jump into 2v2 matches. Use my link in the description to play World War Armies for free, and you will receive the Pershing tank and the desert skin with tokens immediately after finishing the tutorial. Thank you to the team at Hype Masters for sponsoring the video. During the development of Tale of the Dragon, the Forgotten Empires team was responsible for all content. So the art, game design, data, audio, basically everything except code, which was handled by Skybox Labs. While this is a bit untraditional, this in and of itself shouldn't have been an issue, but communication between the two studios was extremely limited, mostly to leadership only, with individual developers at Forgotten Empires not having access to even bug databases. This, along with the fact that both studios were also simultaneously working on an Age of Empires 2 DLC, The African Kingdoms, was simply too many blows to the project. Age of Empires 2 was significantly prioritized, with much of the content for Tale of the Dragon being rushed together in a short crunch phase. With the release itself being handled by Skybox Labs, the team at Forgotten Empires, myself included, had very limited insight on what was actually being delivered to Steam builds. Several times, massive amounts of changes were lost to poor version control practices. To top it all off, we had no internal quality assurance. The closest thing to it was that I obtained permission to subcontract a handful of prominent players from the multiplayer community to act as game balance consultants. While this was fruitful, I don't think I need to explain in too much detail what happens when there is no active QA process. The bugs don't get found and thus don't get fixed. Not that there would have been much time for that, considering that the plug was pulled after a handful of post-release hotfixes and a larger balance patch. It took years for support to be resumed, but even that was brief. By the time the DLC released, I was already working on Halo Wars 2, but could not have impacted anything either way as my contract has expired. It was all a very modest payment of around $6,000 on project completion after nearly a year of working. Not great. And around half of that went to the balance team. As you can tell, Microsoft was not generous with the budget for game design and data work. I'm fairly certain this was true of the other areas as well, so no hard feelings towards Forgotten Empires. Anyway, the good thing is that all this kickstarted my game development career, so in the end I can't complain too much from a personal point of view. But the way things turned out is just a shame for the project and the franchise as a whole. I honestly believe that Forgotten Empires was given the short end of the stick, but needed to accept it all to secure consideration for future projects, which they did get in the end. So with that out of the way, let's discuss the DLC's content itself. I generally believe that the community is correct with their assessment, that Tale of the Dragon is nowhere near the quality level that is suitable for Age of Mythology. That said, there are a good number of relatively easy fixes to make the Chinese a lot more interesting. Let's talk a bit about some missed opportunities that were considered during development, but also were cut. That's right, contrary to popular belief, the finished product isn't actually the best the team could have done. For some of the best ideas of the team, there was simply no time, or the code work to make them happen would have required additional programmers. Let's dive right into some examples of what could have been. We'll get to those pillars I promised by the end. Fushi's gardens were supposed to gather 2 resource types at the same time. Sounds overpowered? As things are now, definitely. It would have required a reduction in the gather rate to be balanced. But this is the kind of major god bonus that makes one god stand apart from the others, and allows players to get creative. Chukanu were supposed to have a rapid fire attack with several consecutive arrows. Age of Mythology doesn't really have the right tech for this. Each projectile would currently do 1 damage against tough targets like buildings to siege weapons, and would completely break the balance if the unit was masked. The launch version even had this problem with just 2 projectiles. The introduction of a persistent volley or beam system would be necessary to make this work. The total damage would be defined for the full duration of the sustained beam, and the percentile value would then be applied to the target based on how much of the animation was completed. The attack would have to be interruptible, triggering a reload animation. One can hope for Retold. Fire lances were supposed to actually have gunpowder shots. Sadly, the entirety of the VFX and audio never got made, drastically reducing the cool factor and impact of this unit. Huge disappointment. Shenong's fire lances in particular should have had exploding payloads for the splash damage. Retold really needs to fix this. Instead of having a copycat catapult, the Chinese were supposed to have a trebuchet with Age of Empires 2-esque deployment mechanics. This would have stood apart from the other offerings in Age of Mythology significantly, which is the whole point of adding new civilizations. The Vermilion Bird was supposed to have very readable attack animations with intense wing flaps generating the tornadoes. Right now they are hacked together with an invisible projectile that then spawns a tornado. The 8 Immortals were all supposed to have their unique names and unique looks. I don't remember anymore where the team landed on the idea itself, but there definitely was talk about a manual mode switch between melee and ranged. I believe that this would make a fantastic addition and make the unit responsible for making the civilization itself more unique. Additionally, castle access was provided to the unit in one of the updates, but I believe Immortals are so powerful given their stats and attack modes that the inconvenience of lost villager training time is a critical component of their design. China in general needs to have a weakness, after all. Chinese myth units in general aren't something that you form strategies around, which in my opinion is a huge shame. Then again, the same could be said about many of the original ones, but I'm sure it would be possible to change that. For example, if the monkeys had the right stats, their stun ability seems amazing both as a raiding option, not to mention the impact in combat in high numbers and staggered use of the ability. Perhaps Shilin could also see more use if its heal ability wasn't a death rattle, but rather periodically triggered, offering longevity in fights. In fact, both of these units might stay relevant throughout the game, if given the opportunity to shine. I'm personally also quite pleased with the amphibian nature of the Salamander and the Azure Dragon, as well as the lifestealing of the Jiangsu. Needless to say, some options are much more underwhelming. such as the passive gold from the Piishu, which in my opinion should rely on something akin to the Norse favor system. It doesn't make sense to get gold income for poking a random granary in the middle of nowhere. This kind of income mechanic needs scaling proportional to the value of the target and the amount of damage you do. It's also been nearly a decade, so I can't remember what the original plan was, but there's my suggestion anyway. The cavalry focus of the faction is often criticized, and rightfully so, considering that granulated towers deal massive bonus damages against them and turn them irrelevant in the late game. This is especially true of the War Chariot, the only Mythic Age cavalry in the game. However, the issue lies not with the War Chariot, but the fact that we kept allowing granulations to shut down cavalry play completely. Something that I would recommend to attempt would be to rebalance and retold how cavalry works as a whole, improve counters, nerf granulations, and buff the stats of the Chinese stable units, the General and War Chariot, while increasing each of their population costs by 1 to compensate. Take away the anti-villager bonus damage from the Scout Cavalry and instead refocus it to be similar to the Raiding Cavalry of Norse, but with the larger bonus versus archers. This will give Chinese a more distinct feel and make them less spammy or more elite, while also helping them against archers, which is a huge weakness of theirs. I think making the Civ spammy was a mistake. This is not fun to play against, particularly when it comes to suicidal attacks into villagers, and generally speaking doesn't work well once choke points are introduced. In particular, large melee armies cannot path properly in Age of Mythology. As for the generals, I think they need another simple tweak to make them interesting. Enough battle cry range to affect range units. Repeatedly triggering the ability, but ensuring that they stay alive is a fun way to micromanage them. But currently they only affect melee units due to the low range. This lends itself well to raids still, such as with War Chariots or Scout Cavalry, both of which have a similar speed. So it all works out, and will continue doing so. I personally quite like that we went with them sort of being key human units, as it presents a method of countering them with myth unit special abilities, as opposed to them being heroes, which at some point they were during development. Anyway, this is in my opinion one of the units to center the Chinese gameplay identity around. The General leading raiding groups and empowering main battles with a mixture of cheap infantry and War Chariots, with a handful of cataphracts and mounted archers supporting, not just the halberdier and true canoe spam that we normally see. As for the mounted archer, it's a concept that wasn't executed properly. This kind of mistake is why post-release support is so important. I believe this unit needs to work like the Mangudai in Age of Empires 4, able to shoot while moving, and also should be able to hit moving cavalry via a track rating of let's say 6. While I understand that some people dislike the Chinese counter system, it's nothing that we haven't seen before. The original game already flips the unit classification and counter system upside down, and it already confuses some people. I believe that we have a tooltip problem in Age of Mythology, with insufficient display and explanation of unit stats. People struggle to understand that the Atlantean destroyers are an infantry unit and not siege, but they have bonus damage versus buildings, while benefiting from infantry and armory tags. Meanwhile, the Catapeltes is an infantry unit that counters cavalry and siege, while the Chiroballista is a siege unit that benefits from armory upgrades but not from engineers. It counters infantry, but the Catapeltes is infantry, so they counter each other. The relationship between the Chinese Cataphract and the core units is comparable to Norse Huskarl used against archers. Cataphract actually struggle with archers and other cavalry quite a bit. Meanwhile, mounted archers counter cavalry units, but enemy cavalry isn't completely helpless, seeing how they can run away. In addition to this, mounted archers certainly don't have the DPS to keep up with a mix of infantry and archers. So these are more complicated unit relationships that need to be presented to the players well, in order to ensure that everyone understands how to use and how to beat each unit. The game needs a better UI to communicate this, and the players need to be better at reading and learning from tooltips. I generally believe the original vision behind the human unit roster can work well, with some tweaks. Another common feedback point is that gardens are too big and awkward to build. All this is very much on purpose, as they are a rather powerful tool in a longer game. It creates a weakness for the Chinese civilization where you must control a large portion of the map and build them in relatively empty spots with little protection. This makes them raidable, which is especially important when thinking of Nuva's gardens that offer the population space, or those of Fuxi that were supposed to gather 2 resource types at once. That said, there's a bug with their physical size in the live game, but placement is awkward due to the incorrect collision size defined. I generally think that god powers are fine, with some balance changes being able to solve almost any issue. This is especially necessary for things like Great Flood, which simply deals far too much damage and ignores damage caps. The other critical power is Call to Arms. What I would recommend here is the duplicated units should be temporary. It's not fine to get ahead of the enemy in military count for free at such an early critical point in the game. This power usually leads to gold control, and even the first gold mine getting denied completely. A short lifespan for the additional units would force a decisive move to be made, as otherwise you would be wasting the power. But in doing so you may be losing your original units, which creates what I believe to be a balanced risk versus reward consideration. Most importantly, your advantage would not be permanent. I also would very much like to see a rework of Inferno to make it more readable. It's hard to tell how it deals damage given that it spreads out so evenly across different units and only moves on to damaging buildings after the unit damage is maxed out. It would be great if both happened simultaneously and it was a bit more comparable to Lightning Storm, with more obvious damage delivery effects. To differentiate, the flames could be doing splash damage, requiring players to split up their units. Both Geyser and Inferno being shut down by Ceasefire is rather weird. If this dynamic is kept, it needs to be more obvious that there is an object attacking units. The one god power that I'm most underwhelmed by is Earth Dragon. You were supposed to be able to teleport it around for the duration of the power. I can't believe this was turned into an impotent Carnivora replica. I have been playing around in mods with making it a one-off with much stronger stats and a ranged attack, but it just doesn't feel good. We need the original concept of the Earth Dragon going back into the ground and re-emerging wherever you want. This would be super fun to use and would certainly satisfy the power fantasy that all Age 4 powers are supposed to be about. Have it keep a lifespan and let players give it underground move orders. I won't be getting into the nitty-gritty of the minor god upgrades at this time, but generally it would be great to ensure that at least all myth units have an upgrade, though this is a bit of a problem for the original civilizations too, which I hope Retold can address. A particularly problematic tech is Landlord Spirit, which is too expensive to come into play with its villager train time reduction effect in the Heroic Age. Usually not many villagers will be affected once you are in the Heroic Age, as you are near the limit if you have gone for an extended Classical Age, though if fast heroic strategies with the cavalry units and generals were a bit more prevalent, it might solve itself as easily as with a cost reduction to the upgrade. Lastly, it would be cool to differentiate the Stirrup upgrade from Golden Peaches. Both giving hit points to some of the same units isn't interesting, so perhaps looking at something related to cavalry damage could be the way to go, and would synergize better with general battle cries too. Needless to say, much of the Chinese art should be reworked in Retold from the ground up. I'd like to think we don't have to worry about a repeat of the PR disaster, where Forgotten Empires brushed aside blatant asset reuse of monumental proportions in a defensive article. Yikes, that was such a bad idea. Like I said, there was very little time to actually make the assets, which necessitated the asset reuse. But this isn't the customer's problem, and they certainly don't need to like or forgive it. The Chinese civilization deserves the kind of attention that more modern Age of projects got, with an expert on Chinese culture consulting on what is appropriately represented and what needs tweaking. On this topic, I'm certain that the key art pieces for the gods were poorly received, and by the gods, let's not even talk about the copy-pasted music from Age of Empires 3. Lastly, a few notes on the campaign. There is really not much to say here. We are looking at a bland plot with matchingly plain, unmemorable characters and one-dimensional missions. The whole thing has absolutely zero connection to the original campaigns. What's even worse is that every single mission is Chinese versus Chinese. When it comes to this, I agree with the community sentiment much more than I do about complaints around the civilization itself. The whole thing needs to be nuked from orbit, and a new campaign needs to be built from the ground up. One that connects with the original cast, and involves multiple civilizations in its plot, and has quality voice acting with memorable new characters. Narrative design is not my area of expertise, nor is my channel about single player. This is why I left this last and kept it brief. Now let's get to our conclusion and list those pillars. With my next points, I will suggest a high-level direction that would, in my opinion, result in a much better Chinese civilization. Note these aren't descriptions of how the Chinese are now, but about how they should be. Chinese is extremely versatile and complex. Generally, they are strong on land maps across all ages, but a niche pick for water maps. War Academy units are the focus of classical fighting. Scout cavalry are optional support here to help handle enemy archers. Fast heroic branches into two major compositions, either stable unit focus or monks with fire lancers. The general is a key unit that makes pushes work or bolsters raids with cavalry and myth units. Players must keep their generals alive and trigger their abilities frequently to succeed. Immortals offer great versatility, but come at the cost of villager training time, meaning they should be trainable only in town centers, and players needing to manage a weapon switch ability manually. Myth units offer a healthy mix between significant solo performance and strategies being built around them, and generally being a helpful part of the army. Nuwa excels at booming and late game play. Fushi prefers classical fighting and pressure play. Shandong flips the rules a bit, excelling on water and focusing on fast heroic strategies, but is weaker with classical fights and boom styles. I hope that you all enjoyed this video, and that it will at least be somewhat useful for the developers of Retold. There will be more Retold video essays coming soon, so make sure to subscribe and ring that bell to be notified. See you around!